I thought you'd have a little more trouble with that.
Not a bad idea.
Don't see her in, you know what, the meeting room.
Well, I mean, when is her date? August 1?
So I
I saw that.
would be surprised. If it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. See, very disguised.
Thanks for this morning and today.
It's meaningless, public comment. Just making it for the record. So.
Well, you know, Deputy Chief. Okay, he was up. Yeah. I thought, oh.
You went to get phone number. Well, we got our phone numbers before we're down there.
So you was talking to the receptionist, I guess.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna tell him straight, but I thought, go the hard way.
Yeah.
Are you ready to plug in?
Yeah, we're all set.
Well, don't you have to?
I already did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we're on.
We're on the record?
Live, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
How come you didn't make that noise? I'll double check.
Yeah, recording in process right now. You're right.
Right. Well, it says we're recording.
Yeah, we switched it up to make it as easy as possible.
Okay, let's come to order. This is our meeting for the DuPage County Zoning Board of Appeals for this evening, July 11. I'm not going to call a roll, but I'll note that all members are present with the exception of Ms. Anderson, who may join us via Zoom. I don't know. There are no minutes to approve at this meeting. And I will call for public comment twice this evening. First category of a public comment will be general public comment unrelated to the hearing that we will open in just a moment. And then at the hearing, at the end of the presentation by Mr. Haas, I'll also call for questions from the board and public comment. With respect to public comment, the county board rules, which have been adopted by this board, permits time for public comment for members of the public address board. Individual remarks shall not exceed 3 minutes in time. I won't take extensive duplicative public comment. And in addition, if the board received public comment via the county online portal per the county board policies, which this board adopts, those comments were provided to members so they can be reviewed. Comments submitted electronically will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Now I'll call the public hearing on T224 text amendment. This is a proposal to consider petition T224 proposed text amendment to DuPage County zoning ordinance chapter 37 relative to electric vehicles, accessory dwelling units, and dwelling units. Add to the permitted and conditional uses sections to allow for electric vehicle charging stations in all non-residential zoning districts. And excuse me, add new residential use requirements and bulk regulations for accessory dwelling units. That is the number of occupants in the accessory dwelling units, number of kitchens, setback requirements, accessory dwelling units, and apartments. This matter was published on June 24, 2024. And I'll now call Ms. Anderson. Let the record show that Ms. Anderson is with us. And now I'll call Mr. Haas for presentation of the text amendment.
You do solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give at this cause now here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
Yes. My name is Paul Haas, H-O-S-S. I'm planning and zoning coordinator with DuPage County Building and Zoning Department. I'm here to present to you a couple of items, caretaking items first. In the flyer sheet, We've indicated to you that we have had two public comments. I think the chairman might have indicated that, one from Village of Batavia, or City of Batavia, and then actually, which is just a general comment about the fact that they have no objections with the proposed text amendments. And we also have, in letter form, a concern from the Village of Burr Ridge, that I wanted to point out. In addition, the next, document that I have for you in your packet is the T224 text amendments that I'd like to submit as exhibit number 1, which is going to be our only exhibit tonight to the board. And then finally, in the latter packet, part of the packet, flyer packet, we've submitted to you the online public comments that we have received through the DuPage County online portal. And we will allow you to go through those at your leisure. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present to the ZBA for the record and for public hearing, T224 amendments to the DuPage County zoning ordinance that effectively deal with two initiatives that the county board is asked us, the county staff, to look into. The first one has to do with electric charging vehicle stations. Currently in DuPage County zoning ordinance, while we don't directly address electrical vehicle charging stations in the ordinance, we do allow electrical vehicle charging stations in single-family homes, and we also allow them as part of a commercial zoning district as a automobile service station. It's part of the sort of umbrella of automobile service stations, which is typically a gas station. What we're doing in this ordinance is further defining electrical vehicle charging stations and some of the appurtenances and components that go along with it in the definition section. And we're specifically talking about how those uses would be allowed as of right as a principal use in all non-residential zoning districts, and also how they would be allowed as an accessory use coupled with other existing permitted uses in all non-residential zoning districts. This essentially would, if passed, would allow electric vehicle charging stations as of right in non-residential zoning districts, provided they meet all the bulk regulations similar to other land uses, and also allow them as accessory uses associated with facilities like restaurants, like retail shopping centers, things like that. The second component of this ordinance is dealing with an initiative that the county is working on right now through its Ad Hoc Housing Solutions Committee to try and scale and produce more opportunities for dwelling units to be developed in the county. And those dwelling units can be anywhere from single-family dwelling units to multifamily to townhouses, apartments, rentals, home ownership, things like that. Excuse me just a second. You can come on in, sir. This is a public hearing. Okay. Sorry about that. The second component of this, as I was saying, has to do with the the Housing Solutions, Ad Hoc Housing Solutions Committee initiative to try and scale and produce more opportunities for dwelling units in the county. You may recall that at our last text amendment, we had some zoning changes that essentially freed up more historic lots of record to be developed as of right. This proposal would be in a similar manner where we currently in the county zoning ordinance allow for accessory dwelling units, or otherwise known as ADUs, in single-family residential properties by conditional use, where those accessory dwelling units have to be in the principal building, the home of the property, can take up no more than 400 square feet, have to be for a family member, someone who is related by blood or by marriage. And also the person who would be living in the ADU has to be at least 62 years of age or older. This new proposal, and that would be allowed, and currently is allowed by a conditional use process, which requires public hearing, and then also ultimate disposition from the full DuPage County Board. The proposal before you tonight would be to allow for ADUs as of right in all single-family residential zoning districts, meaning there would be no conditional use process and no public hearing process to go through. It would allow for those accessory dwelling units to be in the principal home or to be in a detached structure that is existing at the time the ordinance would prospectively be passed by the county board. We don't have a date in here yet, but the presumption is that if this proposal is ultimately approved by the county board, that would set the date for existing detached structures. So any structure, let's just say, for instance, the county board were to pass this on December 31 of 2024. Any structure, any detached structure that was in place prior to that date would be eligible to be converted into an accessory dwelling unit. In addition, we are proposing in this ordinance to allow for the people who are allowed to live in those accessory dwelling units to be people who are not related by blood or marriage to the people who live in the principal building. In addition, this proposal would require that the people who are living in the principal building would have to be owner occupied. So anybody who would take advantage of this new ADU ordinance, they would have to live in the principal building on the property, and the accessory dwelling unit could be rented to someone who is not related by blood or marriage on the property. In addition, the square footage that we're proposing for the ADU, whether it's attached or detached, would not exceed 1,200 square feet. And then finally, there's a provision that we're proposing that the total number of people who could live on the property in the principal building and in the ADU, whether it's attached or detached, could not exceed 5 people who are related by blood or marriage or unrelated by blood or marriage. And the reason for that regulation is this, is that currently DuPage County has a definition of family, and every municipality has a definition of family. The county's definition of family is not more than, is just people who are related by blood or marriage. There's no limitation. People who are unrelated by blood or marriage they're considered a family if they don't exceed 5. So not more than 5 people who are unrelated by blood or marriage is considered a family in DuPage County's ordinance. So 5 people unrelated by blood or marriage could right now live in a single family home with no zoning requirements, no conditional use. They could just go in and do it. If I owned a piece of property, and had a house, I could rent my house to 5 individual people, and those people would have to live in a communal, holistic way on that property. They would all share kitchens, they'd all share the property together. They could each have their own individual room or share rooms, but they could be 5 unrelated by blood or marriage. The point there is that we already have that provision in place. We haven't had any issues with that in the 32 years I've been here. We know we have situations throughout the county where people are living holistically in a single family home where they're not related by blood or marriage. Where we have had instances where they exceed 5 people, we've been able to fix that up pretty quickly. But for the most part, we haven't had any issues with that. The reason we're proposing that as part of this proposed text amendment is that if someone wants to live in their home and have an ADU on their property, historically what we have found, not only in DuPage County, but in other areas of the county and municipalities that have ADUs, it's a situation where someone has a home and they don't have kids living in their home anymore. And they've got the opportunity to rent out a portion of their home or a portion of their accessory dwelling unit because they're just simply not using it anymore. And this is an opportunity for them to do that. And by limiting it to not more than 5 people unrelated by blood or marriage on the whole property, we feel that that will keep some of the other elements that create density issues, that create issues historically on the property, issues creating problems for adjacent property owners and neighbors. It will limit that. And what I mean by that is that we're still going to keep the current requirement for the number of vehicles that can be parked on the property, not more than 6. That's not going to change. So all of the other things that we typically have with single family homes, we're not proposing to change any of those. Some of the outside things that can contribute to diminution of value, property values and things like that, we're going to keep those in place. And one of those is that you don't allow for more than 5 people unrelated by blood or marriage living on the property, which effectively, that's what these ADUs are going to be. You don't have any of the other contributing factors that start to create problems for property values on properties, but it still allows people to be able to rent a portion of their home to someone who is unrelated by them as of right. And it also allows them to convert an existing detached accessory structure into an ADU, and still the neighbors would essentially have the same type of operations that are occurring now in their neighborhood. still can't have more than 6 passenger vehicles. And the amount of people on the property would still be similar to probably what has occurred on that property over time. The other thing that's important, and the reason why we are saying that you are allowed to convert an existing detached accessory building to an ADU, we wouldn't allow you to build a new accessory building after the presumed date that the county board would potentially approve this ordinance. The reason for that is that if there's an existing detached accessory building on the property, then anybody who is living adjacent to that property already is aware that there is a detached building on the property. So the bulk of buildings on the property, irrespective of how they're being used, the physical bulk of the buildings, the neighbors know that they're already existing. So they already have an understanding that there, for instance, is a house and a detached garage on the property. And so when they bought their property and have been living on the property, irrespective, once again, of how the property is being used and how those buildings are being used, they've sort of acclimated the fact that there's a house and there's a detached building on the property. And so it's our belief, not only in terms of doing research, but we've talked about with other communities that have ADUs, it's our belief that at the very least, neighbors are not going to be shocked that all of a sudden, there is a new building going up that has a dwelling unit in it. So there might be the initial shock of that building was used as a garage or was used as a hobby house, and now someone's living in there. But the physical structure itself won't be shocking to the neighbors. It's always been there, and they're used to it. And so that we think that will also mitigate some of the concerns that might be raised by allowing people to have an accessory dwelling unit on the property in a detached accessory building. That, coupled with the fact that they're once again limited to the existing number of vehicles that are on the property, not more than 6, also limited to not more than 5 people unrelated by bloodage on the entire blood or marriage on the entire property. We think those things, along with the fact that they'll have to get building permits from us, and we'll be monitoring it, will mitigate the concerns of having essentially 2 dwelling units on the property. The detached accessory buildings, when they are built, they always have to be smaller in size and height and scope than the principal building. So there's no opportunity to have an expanded detached accessory building that is going to be any larger than the principal building. In most instances, detached accessory buildings that exist right now in the county are relatively small in comparison to the single family homes. The largest that we allow in the county on properties less than 40,000 square feet is 650 square feet. So for instance, even though we do allow for accessory dwelling units to go up to 1,200 square feet, if you have an existing detached accessory building that's 500 square feet, you're stuck with that 550. You can't expand it to the 1,200. If you are putting your accessory dwelling unit in your home, you can use up to 1,200 square feet of the inside of your home for the ADU, but you wouldn't be able to expand to 1,200 feet. You wouldn't be able to expand beyond the size of the existing detached accessory building to get up to the 1,200 square feet. So we think for those reasons, and sort of stress testing a little bit with what we've seen with some of the other communities and how their ADU policies are working, we think that this is a good opportunity to allow for property owners to be able to create more dwelling units, accessory dwelling units on their property. It scales more units, which is in the county for people to live in. And it's not overbearing on the property or on neighborhoods. And it does potentially put more units back into the system, which is a desire of the county board to create more units for people. And those are the essentials of the proposed text amendments that we're putting forward to you today. We have one other minor change to this housing initiative, and it has to do with what are called reserve lots. Reserve lots are also commonly known as flag lots. The reason they're called flag lots is that it's typically you have what's called a key lot. It's a lot that's on the street, and then the flag lot is a hold the flag behind the reserve lot. In our zoning ordinance, we allow that. We allow up to 2 flag lots for a total of 3 lots, the key lot and the 2 flag lots. Right now, the zoning ordinance requires that those 2 flag lots be a minimum of 40,000 square feet in size, irrespective of what type of public utilities you have to them. If those lots were what are called key lots, meaning they were all fronting on a public right of way, depending on the type of utilities you have to them, you could go down to 10,000 square foot lots, or you could go down to 15,000 square foot lots. What we are proposing is to change the minimum lot requirement for a flag lot from 40,000 square feet, irrespective of what type of utilities you have to them, down to whatever the code allows for a key lot in the zoning district. So for instance, if your property was zoned R4 and it was on public sewer and water, the minimum lot size for one of those types of lots is 10,000 square feet. If you had a reserve lot in that, or a flag lot in that same situation, even though you're zoned R4 and you're on public sewer and water, that reserve lot has to be 40,000 square feet. We're proposing in this text amendment that those lots could go down to 10,000 square feet. And the idea there is that once again, that would allow for more opportunities for lots to be made available for people to build on those lots in the county.
Without regard to utilities.
Well, with regard to utilities, and the point there is that in an R4 zoning district, if you were on septic and well, the minimum lot size is 40,000 square feet, and that would apply for a reserve lot as well. If you had sewer, but only well, the minimum lot size is 20 for a key lot. For a reserve lot, you can do 20,000 square feet now. So it's the same requirement on relative to utilities. It just changes whether it's reserve lot or not.
Yeah, I only asked that because earlier I thought you said without regard to
Yeah,
utilities.
sorry. So that's a general overview of our proposed text amendments. I'll be happy to take any questions.
When does the county board want us to act on this?
Well, this is an ongoing process. There is some urgency to be able to move these forward, to get them to the county board. The next county development committee that this could potentially go to would be August 6th. After that, the next county development committee would be the third Tuesday in August. I know that's probably a bit of a quick timeline, but if there is any appetite.
In other words, we don't have to do it tonight. We can wait till our August recommendations.
Absolutely.
In that case, I'll ask whether there are questions from members of the board, but let's reserve our comments for the recommendation session. In other words, the debate about the wisdom of any of this is a different matter than requests for clarification of what's being proposed. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
By any chance, can somebody who has a detached dwelling, or say a garage, because I've seen this happen, and turn it into a living quarters?
Yes, that would, under this code, they could turn that into an accessory dwelling unit, which is a living quarters.
Which doesn't have kitchen and bath.
It would be allowed to have kitchen, bath, yes. So the whole idea with this proposal is that you can, first of all, you can take a portion of your house and convert it into another dwelling unit. And another dwelling unit is essentially, the components of a dwelling unit would be a bathroom, a kitchen, and a living space, place to lay your head. Those are the three major components.
So I could turn my garage into a dwelling place if I add a kitchen and a bath,
Yes, if this ordinance were to pass.
which would mean, yeah, then there'd be construction going on.
They would have to, in each instance, even if you didn't do construction, I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, because the likelihood that you have a bath and a kitchen already in your accessory dwelling unit is very remote. But there could be some instances where someone has gas in their garage and someone already has a bathroom in the garage, because we do allow bathrooms in the garage. And all they would need to do is just hook appliances up. Even in that instance, we are requiring a building permit. So we have a record that someone is turning their accessory dwelling unit into an ADU. Even if they say, we're not actually doing any physical building, we're just bringing an appliances in and connecting it, we would require a building permit so that we've got a record of it.
But if this passes, then nobody can, after that date, build a new garage with 2 rooms upstairs plus a garage.
They could not.
Wait, you can build a garage. You can't build a garage and turn it into a dwelling.
Living quarters.
Correct. After the date, once the county, assuming the county board approves it, whatever the date is, the county board approves it,
Done.
you can build a new garage.
Yeah, but you can't
You
make a
can't
living
convert it into a
quarters
dwelling
out.
unit, nor can you make a dwelling unit on the
Wouldn't
second floor.
qualify for conversion to a dwelling unit.
Correct.
Anything else, Dennis?
Well, you just made a good point. Conversion. not conversion, just you couldn't do it, period.
Period or conversion. So just as an example, after the date, I can build a brand new garage and then I can come in and say, I want to convert the garage into a dwelling unit. We'd say no, because you built the garage after the date that the county board approved it. Now, someone may say, well, I've got a new garage going up behind this accessory dwelling unit, but that was the older garage. And we will say, well, that's permitted because it's an allowable new building as an accessory building, accessory detached garage. But that new accessory detached garage cannot be built or converted into a dwelling unit.
Wow. So I could put a new garage in front of my old garage.
Well, so here's the point there, is that you would still be limited. And going back to the not more than 6 passenger vehicles, not more than 5 people unrelated, all the other codes that are in place for single family, those codes would still be in place for floor area ratio. So you'd still be limited to the size of detached
No, I'm just trying to
accessory.
wrap my head around this, what people who would want to do, try to do.
So someone could build 2 detached garages on their property, provided that they met the square footage requirement. That would stay in place still with this proposal.
Yeah, Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, this is just clarifying a couple of things. For the housing, you said either by blood or marriage. What about adoption?
Blood, marriage, and adoption fall in the same category.
Okay, so just to clarify. And then it's 5 people total living on the property. What if, so if a family that had 5 kids already, there's 7 people living in their regular house, they couldn't do it. All right.
This is not an attempt to, well, let me just say this. There might be a point where we get to that and we change that because we find that it's working. But right now, to sort of mitigate some of the concerns that we've heard about from other communities, this is the way we think that we can sort of start slowly with this. And that is to limit the density, but still allow other people to live on the property, to have an opportunity to have someone who's not related by blood or marriage to be able to rent out a place to live. That may change in the future if it works, but right now we think this helps in mitigating some of the concerns that are out there.
And Ms. Anderson?
So if I have an accessory building, I'm not renting it out, but I have a garage that I want to make an office, so I work from home, say. Can I do that?
So, right now, the county code, and this is not going to change, has what's called a home occupation allowance. And some might say that home occupations and businesses and offices is essentially a difference without a distinction. But what we have about 25 guidelines, or not guidelines, but regulations for home occupations. And it spells out what a home occupation is, and it differentiates from a typical office or business. You can do that right now in a detached accessory building. So we have many detached accessory buildings that are built certainly for garages, but we have some that are built for hobby houses, for pool rooms, for offices, and for home occupations for offices. And for instance, when we issue building permits for that, we make it clear that it's a home occupation and it's built pursuant to the 20-so regulations that are in the ordinance. Having said that, you could not build a building and convert it into an office for that would violate some of the home occupation standards. And just as an example, home occupation standards are your home occupation can't be more than 400 square feet. You can't have more than 3 people that you're taking care of at any one time. And the type of services that can be rendered are listed and delineated. And there are things like you can do legal services, you can do real estate services, you can do.
Nothing about that is changing.
Nothing about this changed. You can do that now.
So it comes to mind that, the, what's it called, Iron Gate garages?
Say that again?
It comes to mind, those Iron Gate garages over in Naperville. I actually think it's in Naperville, but.
Oh, Deal Road?
Yes.
Yeah.
See, I think of those because you have a garage and they don't want people living there, technically. So I'm just coming to play. Will there be more of?
Well, just as an example, that's zoned, I think, either commercial or office.
Okay,
And those are built exclusively to store your cars, and they do have an area above that is used for an office, and I know that they have people living in there, which is not allowed. That's a completely different thing that we're talking about here.
Okay.
We're talking about exclusively residential.
okay.
You're doing. So Paul, I just want to be sure, because I saw this happen, detached garage. Two people were living in the garage and there was no sewer, water, nothing. They would go into the house. Would that be allowable?
No.
Good, okay.
Now, just to be clear, I can be very careful about how I say this, because I don't want to prejudice what we're trying to do here. And that is that these are effectively their own separate dwelling unit with all of the things that you would expect in a dwelling unit, including sewer and water, separate connection, or separate connection to septic and well. There is the opportunity for you to tap into the service line that is already coming to the house. But you have to have your own separate utilities inside of the building. You don't necessarily have to come out to the main line out to the street, but you can tap into the existing utilities of the house. But you have to have those utilities and facilities inside the accessory dwelling unit.
Is there anything in this ordinance that relates to the condition of the existing structure that might be converted to a dwelling unit?
No, other than the fact that if it is going to be converted into a dwelling unit, it will have to get a building permit, at which point the county could require that if the building is deficient currently, it would have to be brought up to minimum code as a dwelling unit. So we might have a building out there right now that's dilapidated, and if someone wants to convert it, they have to get a building permit, and they'd have to fix it to a minimum standard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, but it also makes sense to me to consider our usual sort of 50% rule. But I'll discuss that at the recommendation meeting. And is there a definition in here about what constitutes being related by blood and marriage?
There is.
Just explain that briefly. I mean, you know, my wife's fourth cousin is presumably not qualified.
No, it's, I will tell you this, that the definition of blood and marriage essentially comes from a standard definition from the American Planning Association. It doesn't get into the detail that you're talking about. It's left a little bit vague for some of those reasons. But historically, our interpretation is essentially immediate blood or marriage. You know, it's someone who you married and your children, or it's someone that you married and their children. And that's about the extent it goes.
Any other questions? Well, I have no idea what you people are interested in, but I'm ready to take public comment related to the text amendment. After that, we'll close the hearing and I'll take unrelated public comment, any public comment on any subject, which we're required to do because of the Open Meetings Act. Again, for those that came late, essentially, I really don't want to invite a lot of duplication in comments. So if you agree with someone that spoke before you, then please just indicate that you agree. And then again, the limitation is for 3 minutes per person. So whoever wants to speak, please raise your hand and be sworn in. If you're not sworn in now, I'm going to assume you do not want to speak. And I can't see behind me, but I don't see anybody with their hands up.
There's a couple.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know there were people back there. Okay, raise your hands.
Raise your right hands, please, if you want to be sworn. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony about to give at this cause now hearing be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Is there anyone here that represents a group
I'll bring it up.
that I'll call on first, or are you all individuals? All right, then, who'd like to begin? Go right ahead. Name, spell your name, give us your address, then make your comment, please.
Thank you, sir. Hello, my name is Laura Ludwig, Laura Ludwig. I live at 1S 651 Winfield Road, Wheaton, Illinois 60189. I've been a resident there for 21 years. I oppose the amendment to the zoning code for many reasons. However, I will only expand on the three most concerning. The first being that homeowners are not equipped to be landlords. Homeowners do not have to show fair housing practices, provide transparency in accounting for income, or necessarily provide appropriate upkeep for the ADU, providing safe and secure facilities. On the other hand, professional apartment complexes, developers, and real estate firms must follow all laws and practices as they are audited by banks and other oversight bodies. Providing residential housing should remain exclusively with these entities, not to individual residences. These professional entities employ licensed service people for electrical, plumbing, HVAC, drinking water, and sanitation services. Homeowners are not required to do that for their maintenance. And in many cases, homeowners do not even obtain legal permits for their work. In addition, the human rights of the renters may also be jeopardized by the homeowner. For example, it isn't beyond the realm of possibilities that homeowners could house immigrants and potentially traffic them in exchange for rent. And lastly, to this point, the occupants of the ADU may squat after several months, then creating a situation whereby the homeowner has no rights and will in turn likely turn to county resources for assistance, to which it is doubtful they will be available. My second, there are no automatic enforcement measures in place. The zoning change indicates that the property owner must live on premises within either the primary residence or the ADU. There are no measures in place to verify this requirement beyond day one, and therefore lends itself to providing the ability for two families unrelated to rent within a neighborhood community on a single property. Furthermore, there is no measure in place to verify that when the ADU is empty, that it will be returned to original condition, whatever that means, because it is unclear. Therefore, it will be continually rented as a residence or will sit dormant and in decay, as I can state firsthand based upon an existing, non-permitted, mind you, conversion of a hobby house into an ADU that is next to my property. This is a view from my driveway. In the foreground, you can see our maintained property. The lawn at the ADU has not been mowed in over 3 years. Rodents are in our yard and infesting our garage. Here is a view of the ADU from my driveway as I enter to my home. Likely all ADUs will be in sightline of neighbors, but not the primary resident because of unsightliness, and they don't want it in their backyard. So they'll put it in their neighbors. Despite us informing the owners of this supposed ADU, they attempted to occupy the building when we told them it was not to be done so. We had to call the county, and the building department slapped a no occupancy. There is no automatic enforcement by the county. They don't have the resources to make sure this kind of thing doesn't become pervasive. And lastly, my last, a decrease in neighbor property value. The homeowner that erects an ADU on their property will see a revenue stream from the renter and possibly a slight increase in value. Per a published research paper entitled Spillover Effects of Accessory Dwelling Unit Development, dated August 2023, by Department of Economics, University of California, Irvine, the increase of only 0.5% of ADU density in a neighborhood directly related to a 4% decrease in property value across that neighborhood.
Can I ask you to wrap up?
Yes. Essentially, it's a sixfold detriment. This loss in property value was most greatly shouldered by adjacent properties. Therefore, the code will only incentivize every owner that can erect an ADU at the demise of their neighbors who can afford to do so. I strongly oppose this change.
Thank
Everybody
you.
together?
I
agree.
I agree.
Okay.
I
Whoa,
agree.
whoa, whoa, whoa. I have to get your names. Although you're keeping to the spirit of what I invited. I let you go approximately double the amount of time that I indicated initially. And the reason is I thought your remarks were particularly well organized, and I saw a lot of people shaking their heads, so that I thought perhaps some of those people would, instead of going on at length, would simply indicate that they agree with the prior speaker. Now, having said that, can I just go down the line here to get, so I'm somewhat organized about this? Are you
Yes, I'll speak.
indicated? So could you give us your name, address?
Sure. My name is Sheila Rutledge. My address is 1N127 Ridgeland Avenue, unincorporated West Chicago. I have an ADU on my property.
Sure. Hold on one second.
Just a second.
Certainly. I'm getting a request to go off the record for a moment. This will not count against your 3 minutes.
Why don't you go with somebody else while she's.
Yeah,
doing
I
that?
think I will indeed do that. So let's go to the next person.
My name is
We'll back
Alice.
on the record.
My name is Alice Cush. I live at 1S270 St. Mihiel Drive, Winfield,
Can you spell your
Spell
last
your
name?
last name.
KUSH. My question has to do, I live in a subdivision that has all septic units. And we talked about having the proper services. I remember we built the house, there were limits on what the number of people and what you could do, and the septic system was sized for that. Is that a consideration? I don't see that mentioned in here.
Well, I think it is in there.
That's all he's thinking.
It's not.
Mr. Haas will address that at the end. Yeah, it is. Okay, thank you very much. Back to Ms. Rutledge.
I will remove my remarks tonight. I'm here to observe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I didn't recognize you at first. Okay, sir.
Okay, my name is Ralph Watt. I live at 0S550 Morningside in Winfield in unincorporated DuPage County.
Can you spell your last name, please?
WATT,
Thank you.
just like a light bulb. To me, the ZBA petition T224 changes the entire character and intent of the existing zoning ordinance for ADUs, which are already permitted in accessory structures for use as habitable dwellings. Unfortunately, the changes, in my view, are poorly written and vague, which eliminates all meaningful restrictions and essentially permit any property to be converted into multifamily use with as many as 5 different families represented in a single thing. I'll give you some examples. Paul mentioned the thing about 5 people. The way the wording is point blank, I'll read it. It says the total number of occupants in the combined principal and accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 5 people. It doesn't say anything about family. It doesn't say anything about that. It says 1 or more must be related. That's it. So in other words, this ordinance, if it passes, is essentially saying nobody can have more than 5 people living in any residence or address anywhere. That's what it says, point blank. In other words, you've taken over from China to limit family size.
That's off.
Pardon?
Never mind, go ahead.
In
412(2)E, the petition states that it proposes that a permit be obtained for conversion, including a floor plan and a reconversion plan. 2 things with that. It does not mention anything else that is required for a building permit, which includes health department, drainage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It includes none of those. It doesn't talk about access. It doesn't talk about parking. It doesn't require any of those things. It puts the entire onus on the building department to basically say, we'll take care of everything, don't worry about it. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think you need to have it vetted through the health department. You need to have it vetted through stormwater management department, and you need to have it vetted by legal. As proposed in the petition, it appears that anybody who has a travel trailer parked on their property can convert it into an ADU. simply by putting it on blocks. Because it has a kitchen, it has a bathroom. It's a structure, yes. Does that mean that anybody who has a travel trailer can suddenly rent it? Lastly, the idea of reconversion is highly questionable, as if the ADU is no longer required, it no longer requires a conditional use permit. The petition eliminates paragraphs 417.2 and 417.3, which are the only means the county has to control the usage of an ADU as a dwelling. And it eliminates both of those. So there is no control left for the county over the ADU. It's essentially the same as any other structure. Next, petition revises the maximum size of an ADU to 1,000 square feet. Okay, I'll try to go fast. But it does not establish a minimum size, nor does it establish a minimum size per occupant. So in other words, you could take a 10 by 10 shed and put 4 people in it according to the way this thing is written. That's not reasonable. That's not fair.
Thank you, sir. Can I go to the next lady?
Sure, may I?
Sir.
Hi, my name is Rose Kunze, Kuntzee. I live at 1 South 700 Blakewood Court in unincorporated Winfield. My husband and I are 79-year residents of DuPage County and live in R2 zoning of unincorporated Winfield. We strongly oppose the ADU amendments because they threaten the privacy, security, property values, and a green space of single-family residential neighborhoods. Our forest preserves provide 26,000 acres of open space for us to enjoy. Our yards are our forest preserves. Who among us was not thankful for the privacy, tranquility, and safety of our properties during COVID? No one I know. We understand the need for accessible housing. It is an issue everywhere. But for the county to shift its burden to provide ADU housing to residents under the guise of, quote, revenue generation and wealth building for homeowners, especially for those who experience high housing costs, unquote, is ludicrous. The petitioner isn't asking residents to plant temporary double World War II era victory gardens to help a cause. It is asking homeowners to build permanent rental housing structures of which they will become landlords and all that entails. Resident landlords would incur the cost of constructing and maintaining such units. How is that lessening costs for financially struggling homeowners? Perhaps the county should focus on finding innovative ways of reducing property taxes for everyone, especially seniors who haven't had children in the schools for 20+ years. Have you driven through Winfield, Wheaton, or Glen Ellen recently and noticed the housing they are building? They're advertised as luxury high rises. Where are their strategies and help in providing accessible housing? I believe ADUs have been under consideration in Chicago and Cook County since about 2020 without effective outcomes. Does DuPage County strive to emulate Cook County? I hope not. Questions regarding this position are many. Here are just a few of mine that may overlap yours. Will ADUs change zoning classifications? If yes, how? How will an ADU affect the homeowner's property taxes? Will our assessor, Mark Millay, be tasked with reassessing these or all properties? Will the homeowner be responsible for insuring the ADU? If yes, at what cost? What recourse will a homeowner have if a renter no longer pays rent and becomes a squatter? Will the addition of ADU occupants prompt the need for more schools and social services? Will ADU occupants overload our medical facilities even more than they are already? Will an ADU have its own address and will it require a separate mailbox? Will that address be used by fire, police, and emergency services? If yes, how will they locate and access the ADU? Will it have its own driveway? Can ADUs have patios, garages, and sheds? Will an ADU have separate gas and electric meters? How will ADU occupants register to vote or be counted on a census? A maximum structure size, well, it said 1,000 square feet, but Paul just said it was 1,200, is noted in the petition.
Wrap up quickly, please.
I'm almost done. I have 2 more paragraphs. What is the minimum size? Where are kitchen and bath facilities defined? Are we talking about a compost toilet, a handheld shower head, a microwave, and a hot plate? How will it be determined if current well and septic systems remain adequate and functioning with the addition of more occupants? Will the health department be required to approve and monitor these properties on a regular basis? So many questions. I ask you to take a virtual tour of your property and imagine where such an ADU could be placed and how it would negatively impact your quality of life. Now take a second tour looking at your adjoining properties and envision where your neighbors' ADUs would be placed in conjunction with your home. Like what you see? I think not. Unlike homeowners, renters do not have a vested interest in maintaining property values. If you are of the mindset that if you build it, they will come, then be ready to accept the consequences. I request that any county or zoning board member that either currently has an ADU or anticipates constructing one abstain from voting as a matter of conflict of interest. Please vote to deny petition 224's ADU amendments.
Thank you. Right. There's a couple of other people on this row, I think, that were sworn in. You were.
I was, but they've covered
Well, then
everything.
just say your name,
My name
address,
is-
and say, I agree with the prior speakers.
My name is Ronald Couture, Couture, 1S671 Ardennes Court, Winfield, unincorporated.
Good, thank you.
Okay? I agree with what they've said. The only thing that I was looking for was, I think she touched on, was the impact on services and looking at your neighbor's property, because the area we have, there's a lot of room, and I see a lot of buildings here and there that they're using for potting sheds or stuff like that. And I dread to see them having people move into that. So
Okay, thank you, sir.
My name
Yes.
is Heather Alton, my husband, Tim Alton, we're both here. We live at 1 South 710 Winfield Road. We've been residents for 20 years in DuPage County. We both lived in Cook County. We moved to DuPage County for a quiet space to raise our children, to enjoy the parks, enjoy our neighbors, get to know them. Most of them are here. And we've also had horrible situations that we've had to help our neighbors with flooding roads and emergency services at night, in the day. We've had accidents happening because there aren't enough places for people to pull off to get help that they need. We are very opposed to this, and we hope that you hear our hearts and that we are all supporting our neighbors here in this DuPage County to have a better place to live, and also to address the many needs that we currently have with our current residents.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm gonna go to the row behind. You guys were sworn in?
Yeah.
You want to make a statement or
Sure.
just indicate your
Michael
name and that you
Sinise.
agree?
I live in unincorporated West Chicago.
Spell your
28
name.
West, Sinise, Senese, 28 West, 655 Child Street. The question that I have is, does all of the construction on these new dwellings have to be completed before the board approves it? And will they be able to continue construction after, if there is an approval? Because being in the construction industry, I can tell you that what needs to be done to a garage to meet the standards that you just said can never be done by December 31st. So I don't even understand the point of bringing this up.
Yeah, well, I think I know the answer, but we'll let Mr. Haas clarify that when he wraps up at the end.
And the other
Thank
thing
you,
that I
sir.
wanted to say is, so just to be clear, we have 1,200 square feet that we can work with. And would I be able to build micro units? As long as I'm done before the vote, I could build 350 square foot micro units, build 5 people in each one? Or how does that work? If I wanted to tear down my garage and build those,
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
against the.
Good, thank you, sir. Next.
My name is, excuse me, Michaeline Burke. I'm also 28 West, 655 Child Street, my husband. We just moved here about 3 weeks ago. Thank you for your service. Do have tremendous concerns about this. My first and foremost is if you have 5 unrelated people living in an ADU. That is, and you have, let's assume 5 unrelated people in an ADU, 6 cars. Has there been a traffic impact study? Has there been a school impact study? Has there been a fire impact study? Has there been a police impact study? Library impact study? How will we tax? Will there be separate tax plats? Will the ADU have a separate PIN? This is just so vague and uncharted, and I don't see any evidence other than anecdotal. I would say that there is no way we could possibly this would be like the wild, wild west. It's completely unregulated. I'm very much against it, and as moving here, would not have moved here had I be able to build. I mean, I could do it right now. I could turn my garage into 3 micro units and have 3 different families of 300 square feet each family with 1 person in each unit with schools. I mean, it's a disaster.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
Anybody
Mr.
else?
Chairman?
Yeah.
Could you, as a speaker, maybe rephrase the word she used, retarded? I kind of find that offensive.
Retarded. I have a son with Down syndrome. I would never
Just
say
say
that.
it because.
didn't say
You didn't say that.
at all.
We
I would
didn't hear that.
I'm kind of,
Let me be the first to say, I have a son with Down syndrome. I would never,
I would thought you.
ever say that, and I'm offended that you would even suggest it.
Did with Special Olympics and that saying.
I am
Okay, I got it.
really,
She didn't say
Tell
that.
me,
Okay.
Let's move on.
We didn't hear it.
okay.
Anybody else in the back?
There's someone over there.
Somebody over your shoulder.
But no one else, yeah, I understand there's people here. No one else in the back was sworn in the back row there? Okay, then. How many people back here were sworn in? Just 3, 2, 3? All right, would you like to go first, sir?
Yeah, George Petrowski, Piotrowski, 28W651 Washington Avenue, West Chicago, 60185. I agree with so far with everybody that's been talking. I have 2 other issues that I'm wondering about. One of the things that I've seen in the news is a lot of corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard are on a big spur to buy up properties and residential properties. And supposedly at some point they'll be having as much as 60% of the consumer housing market in the next 10 years. My issue is whether or not this is, well, the homeowner, primary homeowner can do this. If they see in low density properties, all this land, they could easily come in and, because they've been doing this, outbidding people. Whenever people sells it, they buy this land, then they put up these properties and then they add more. Now you have not just a homeowner being a renter, but now you have a corporation that's renting out all these additional properties. That's my one concern. The second issue is whether or not this potential, in other words, I have 2 acres, so I have potential to have more properties. Is that potential tax burden on me because you have that potential? Are you going to be taxed even though you're not producing additional property and rental? Are you going to be taxed because you have that potential?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting point, but I don't think it's.
It's relevant,
I'll
but
let Mr.
that's my particular concern. But the one about the fact that corporations buy property and.
Okay, this lady, next lady.
My name's Erica Whitty and I live at 1 South 771 Winfield Road. I live really close to the neighbors who shared off some of the pictures. And I can attest that this is a very, that the current existing laws do not have the enforcement to even enforce what we currently have in the books. And so we have somebody who has rented their primary residence and then tried to rent out the secondary ADU. So now you don't even have a primary homeowner on property. And so it's clearly unkept. And there's absolutely no mention of who are the people coming in. There are people who need to live in ADUs. Think about, there could be a nice old lady who needs to rent an ADU, but there's also people who are of a vulnerable population who can be taken advantage of. There's also people who are undesirable. And I have 2 little girls on my property. I picked out the place where I could raise them safely. And to have somebody come in and rent their shed, literally it is a shed, to somebody who hasn't even gone through a criminal background check is absolutely unacceptable and unenforceable. How do we get these people out? How do we make sure that they're the right people to be looking in our windows?
Okay, thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Last person here, I think, was the last speaker, sir.
Kevin Schiller, it's Schiller. I live at 1S 719 Winfield Road, Wheaton, Illinois. I support everything everybody's been saying. This is a problem.
Okay, thank you, sir. And Mr. Host, do you want to take the stand again or go up to the podium and respond to questions.
So as always, in the 32 years I've been here, when we've had stuff in this area, we've got a good group of homeowners association and neighbors that come out and really test the petitioner. In this case, it's the government. So I do appreciate the interest and the concerns. Now, having said that, generally, relative to all the concerns that you're talking about, one of the things that we have done, where you don't specifically see it in the ordinance, in this zoning ordinance, but addresses most of the concerns that you're talking about, is the building permit process. We are requiring that if someone is going to convert a portion of their house or a detached accessory building, they have to get a building permit, irrespective if they're not even gonna do anything. And it's unlikely, bear with me, it's unlikely that we have a situation where someone doesn't have to do something. But even in the instance where, as I said earlier, they have gas and electric and plumbing already into a detached accessory building, and they tell us they just want to connect to utilities, we still are, or appliances, we're still going to require them to get a building permit and follow this code. Now, the building permit process, which is not contained in this ordinance, is already in all the other ordinances that we have in the county. When you apply for a building permit, you have to meet the county building code. So any conversion.
That's an if.
They're not being enforced.
That's it. I got septic water in my backyard, right?
Okay, I'm
Okay,
sorry, sir,
because-
but
Yeah,
I mean, it's not a dialogue. He's trying to respond as best he can, and you're just gonna have
Give me better
to
answers.
accept the response. I will say that you can supplement your remarks with additional written comments, which will be made part of the record.
So, anybody who builds anything in the county's got to get a building, unincorporated has got to get a building permit. I'm not suggesting that.
thanks very much. I'm walking home.
Sure. So anybody who builds something in the unincorporated area has to get a building permit. If for whatever reason, through a complaint from a neighbor, from an inspection done by the county, a complaint from a bank, a title company, a homeowner, a lender, we find out that someone's built something without a permit, we issue a violation notice and we pursue that through a violation process, which includes going to adjudication hearings and also going to circuit court. So we do have a process in place to deal with people who are violating. I don't want to get into that much detail here, but what I'm getting at here is that if someone is going to take advantage of this ordinance, if it passes by the county board, they will have to get a building permit. If someone, for instance, sees this ordinance and says, I can do this, and they don't get a building permit, and we find out about it, we will issue a violation notice and we'll follow that process. Now, as it relates to getting a building permit, when you apply for a building permit, even though all of the details of health, sewer and water, septic and well, stormwater, drainage, building codes, fire codes, they're not specifically in the zoning ordinance. They are contained in other ordinances, which are much more detailed than even the zoning ordinances. Most of our other ordinances are actually designed and developed by outside engineers and architects and planners that create, for instance, the county building code, which is an international building code that gets updated every 3 years and we adopt. So that the standards for building will be applied to internal development of ADUs, when I say internal, in the house or in detached buildings. So people will have to follow building codes, health department codes, stormwater codes, and also township and division of transportation highway codes. Through the building process, they will go through an entirely additional vetting process. The health department, and let me back up here. They will have the opportunity to get it from a zoning standpoint, but if they don't meet the health department codes, it'll be rejected. They won't get the building permit. They will not be able to do it. Same thing with building, same thing with stormwater and drainage. So that's an overview that I hope you may not be comfortable with the answer because the detail is lacking relative to the zoning code, but the detail is in all the other codes and they will have to follow those other codes and get those permits. Now, as it relates to this concern about building something now in anticipation that this ordinance passes. What we are proposing is if you have an existing detached accessory structure built in place, permitted and approved by the county, and the county passes this ordinance, that structure would be eligible to be converted to a detached dwelling unit. Anything that is built after this ordinance is passed would not, as a detached accessory building, would not be able to be converted. So I think one of the concerns was, you know, when do we need to start building these in anticipation that this zoning ordinance would be approved? Well, the answer to that in theory would be if you think this ordinance is getting approved and you want to take advantage of it, you'd start building a detached accessory building now, get a permit for it, have it in place, so that it would be in place when this ordinance is approved. I don't think that was the intent of the question, but the most important answer is that detached accessory buildings that are existing, permitted, and approved at the time this ordinance is approved, if it is approved by the county board, would be eligible. Anything built after that would not be eligible. The next concern that is out there is this definition of family, and this notion that a definition of family is blood, marriage, and as Mr. Schultz pointed out, to adoption. We all sort of know what that means. There's our immediate family members that there are our wives, our husband, and then the children of the wives and husbands. That's blood and marriage. In the county zoning ordinance, as is the case in all ordinances, not only in DuPage County and municipalities, but through the state of Illinois and throughout the country, because of the Federal Fair Housing Act, there have been some lawsuits over the years that creates a concern that the definition of family has to include people who are not related by blood or marriage. And for DuPage County, that number of people has historically been 5. There are some communities that have 3. There's some communities that have 8. There's a federal fair housing standard that was created in 1988 that dealt with, there's a lawsuit that dealt with a group or daycare homes, where you had to allow people who were afflicted with some disability or were over the age of 55 to live together in a unit with 2 caretakers, where for DuPage County, that number is 8 now. And the purpose for that is that the federal government and some of the advocates for people who were institutionalized, either in senior homes that weren't really getting the socialization that the advocates for those groups had, basically filed a lawsuit. And the result of that lawsuit was to be able to have daycare homes, which allow up to, once again, 8 people who have some disability or are over the age of 55 to be able to live together in a holistic way with 2 caregivers. So there are many different iterations of what the definition of family is and how people can live together in a single family home throughout this country and in DuPage County. Now, having said that, blood or marriage are not more than 5 people unrelated by blood or marriage. 5 people not connected at all. What we're proposing in this ordinance is if you want to have a single family home and an accessory dwelling unit, whether that accessory dwelling unit is in your principal home or is in an existing detached building, we are saying if you make that decision, then you will be limited to not more than 5 people related by blood or marriage or unrelated by blood or marriage living in both of those units. So at that point, you as the property owner and the person living on the property will be making that decision to limit yourself to not more than 5 people unrelated by blood or marriage. So for instance, so no more than 5. So for instance, if I have a family of 5, I have me, my wife, and 3 kids, and I all of a sudden want to turn my detached garage into an accessory dwelling unit, I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm already maxed out on the number of people that are living on that property, 5. Now, if I want to have more kids, I can have more kids and I can have as many kids as I want. I can live in the single family home. I just can't put those kids in a detached accessory dwelling unit. So I'm not limiting my ability to have blood or marriage relationships limited in terms of numbers in my principal home. But when I make the decision to have an accessory dwelling unit, I am saying at that point, I'm going to have to limit the amount of people, blood or marriage or otherwise, that live on my property. So I hope that addresses some of the concerns about having, 5, 6, 7 families on the property. Just not simply gonna be able to do that under this ordinance. I think the last thing that was of concern here is dealing with some of the semantics of how do we deal with school districts? How do we deal with fires? How do we deal with taxation? How do we deal with parcel numbers? These are accessory dwelling units. These are not attempted to be carve-outs for new single-family homes. And I know that some of you may think that that's a difference without distinction, that we're effectively creating a second single-family home on the property. We believe that some of the other mitigating things that we've talked about here truly treat these as accessory dwelling units, and the accessory dwelling unit will be limited in scope in terms of size, in terms of use, in terms of the number of people that are living in there. So it is not similar to a typical single-family dwelling unit. And for that reason, you won't get a separate parcel number. You won't have to subdivide or divide your property. Historically, when we have situations where we have existing attached dwelling units, or even in some cases, we've given variations to have detached dwelling units for people who are living on the property who are related by blood or marriage. The assessor's office hasn't treated that as a separate single-family home and taxed it differently and added to the tax value to that. We understand that that would be the same case here. It would truly be accessory. It would not be principal. So some of those things that you are concerned about, adding to our tax burden, getting different parcel numbers, things like that, that would not occur in this situation. In terms of how the number of cars, I think there was a question about how you've got 5 people unrelated by blood or marriage, you're gonna have a lot of cars on the property. Once again, all the other things that we've talked about, and maybe I didn't go into all of them, but all the other things that we've talked about that are currently in place for a single-family home, all of those would continue to apply. Right now, you're not allowed to have more than 6 passenger vehicles on a property. A passenger vehicle is a vehicle. We customarily know passenger vehicles as our cars that we drive every day, but by the Illinois vehicle, the passenger vehicle is a vehicle that has 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating or less. Typically a car, sedan, could even be a truck. We actually raised, the state raised the gross vehicle weight rating because of the trucks that we have out there now, the F1s and things like that. So you're still going to be limited to 6 of those vehicles on the property. And for instance, I've got 5 unrelated people on the property and each guy has 2 cars. They can only have 6 cars on the property. They're going to have to get rid of one of their, each one of their cars. All of those rules and regulations are still going to apply. You're not going to be able to do anything differently than what you already would. The other thing that we heard about is and I talked about a little earlier, we would not be allowing someone to build a brand new building. The buildings that exist at the time would be the ones that would be converted, including the detached buildings. And we understand that people who are living next to a house right now that has a detached structure, whether it's a hobby house or whether it's a detached garage or even a shed, understands that shed, hobby house, or garage is being used for things like parking cars and putting your kids' toys and bicycles and things like that. We understand that converting that to a dwelling unit where people will be living there is going to be a bit of a shock. We think that shock is mitigated by some of the things we talked about, but more importantly, it's mitigated by the fact that at the very least, we understand that when we moved in next to that property, that building was there. So that building's not going to change. The size of the building's not going to change. The roof line's not going to change. The outer appearance of that the building's not going to change. The only thing that will change will be people living in there. In addition, people would not be able to expand it. They wouldn't be able to, the only potential thing that could happen to that, and I think Mr. Carthel alluded to this, is that if that building is not suitable for a dwelling unit, it would have to be rehabilitated on the interior to make it suitable. So at the very least, this building might be in better shape than it was before when it was being used as a shed or something like that. I hope that addresses, even generally, some of the things that I think we're concerned about. Right here, questions.
Can we ask any questions?
So, your responses, I know we're supposed to conclude with your answers, but your responses, I think, raised additional questions.
Fair enough.
So I don't want to argue the wisdom of any of this, But if there are additional questions that are related to this response, I think it's only fair that we take those questions. If you only ask a question, you don't have to be sworn in.
Limited time for this purpose?
Yeah, I'm trying, well, you don't have to stay, as a matter of fact, because this is just public comment. But I want to flesh this out a little bit. I'll start.
Good.
If the building codes, health department regulations, et cetera, are the control over the things that are unstated within the ordinance, what is the concept? Does the discovery of building code issues negate the opportunity for the accessory dwelling unit, or do you simply buy a retroactive building permit and conform the property? In other words, do you have to, well, do you understand my question?
I do. The bottom line is that when a building permit application comes in, it's reviewed by various disciplines. In this particular case, the zoning, just hypothetically, zoning would check it off and say approved. The permit wouldn't be issued because the building department would have to say approved. The health department would have to say approved. The drainage and stormwater department would have to say approved. The township highway or.
Because the structure existed prior to the effective date, can you cure your problems with building code and then avoid the effective date rule?
Well, you could cure the interior, but you couldn't add on to that structure. Like,
Yeah, I'm not talking about that.
yeah. So for instance, well, in all instances, I think for the most part, if you have a detached garage, that detached garage is not suitable for habitable space just because, for instance, in a habitable space, you have to have a certain amount of insulation, and most garages don't meet the insulation requirements. So you would have to bring that interior of the building up to meet the insulation requirements, to meet the electrical standards.
But if you don't do it and you're caught 3 years later.
You get a violation notice.
And you get a violation notice. You put your insulation up, pay twice the fee for the building permit and go on with the use of the dwelling?
So long as you can show that that building existed in the same configuration that it is 3 years later on the day that the county board, or prior to the day the county board passed the ordinance.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I don't like the answer, but I understand it. Okay, who's next? You raised your
I
hand.
do, I just, and I'm.
Can you state your name again?
Sure, my name is Michaeline Bronicky, 28 West, 655 Child Street, unincorporated Washington. So I'm confused as to why we're eliminating the condition, taking this from conditional use to by right. So ADUs are permitted with the conditional use. Why are we eliminating that safety? So that gives you authority, so you can make sure and check all this and vet this, and otherwise it's by right.
Right. So with a conditional use, the conditional use by law is something that the government has already deemed to be appropriate.
Correct.
The purpose of going through the conditional use process is to vet what operational issues might exist that would cause the county to place conditions on it to mitigate those operational issues. We believe that by right, with the regulations that we're proposing, already mitigate those concerns. And we're also concerned that if one were to go through the conditional use process, historically, based on the way zoning entitlement processes go, it's likely that they won't get approved.
So the conditional use process is a safety there.
Yeah, we think the safety mechanisms are in place with the regulations and getting the building permits.
Okay, there's another lady here.
Yes, Laura Ludwig.
Can I go back to you?
Laura Ludwig, 1F651 Winfield Road. I didn't quite understand your comment about that the ADU is not a single family dwelling. Could you expound on that? Because there is no reference in there how long, I mean, a family of four could conceivably live in an ADU, because 1,200 square feet is a pretty big square footage. So family of four can live in there, and that's called a single family dwelling unit, and there's no limitation on how long they live there or the contracting requirements with the primary owner of the house.
Right.
So you stated that it wasn't considered a single family dwelling, that there wasn't single families living there.
So,
I didn't quite understand.
in planning regulations, the predicate for, single family is not single family, it's dwelling unit. And a lot of times we, always say things like when we zone properties, we say this is a single family zoning district and this is a multifamily zoning district. And we think that the baseline is single family, multifamily. It's actually not. The baseline, the predicate for all types of residential units starts with the term dwelling unit. And so what we're saying is that the primary use of a property in one of our single family residential zoning districts, R1, 2, 3, and 4, which is what we have in DuPage County, the primary residence is the single family dwelling. This second unit that we're talking about is accessory to the single family dwelling. But by saying accessory, we're saying it is subordinate to the main principal building, which is a single family home in terms of the structures. The building itself and the size that you can occupy is going to be smaller than the principal. All the other things that apply to the principal will actually inure to the accessory, but you can't go beyond that, such as right now, the single family home is entitled to 6 passenger vehicles. If you have an accessory dwelling unit on the property, both uses combined are still allowed no more than 6. So the idea there is that the building and structures that are associated with this, the single family home and the accessory unit in the single family home or detached, will always be subordinate to the main use of the property, that's single family. And as I mentioned earlier, it may be a difference without a distinction, but if you had someone living in the single family unit as a single family and you had someone living in an accessory dwelling unit, from a practical standpoint, that's essentially 2 single family units. But from a structural standpoint, from an operational standpoint, it's our belief with all these regulations in place that the people living in an accessory dwelling unit, the building itself and the area itself will be smaller and subordinate to the principal, and the operations and the activities of the people living there will be subordinate to the operations and the way that people are living in the single family, just because of the size of the area that they can live in. It's going to be very difficult practically, and B, technically, to get building permits and get septic permits and get, well, drainage is not really an issue here. But it's gonna be very difficult for someone who's living in the accessory dwelling unit to have, well, certainly more than 4 people living in that accessory detached dwelling unit, because at the very least, if you have a single family home and you have 4 people living in an accessory dwelling unit, you're limited to 1 person living in that single family home, because recall, if you choose to have both, you're entitled to only have 5 people living on that
One
property.
person being the primary resident, 4 people could be
Sure,
in
sure.
the ADU.
Sure.
So-
And we believe that all these regulations, even though that effectively is 2 single family homes, we do believe that all these other regulations that limit the size, limit the scope, limit the number of parking spaces or parking or vehicles on the property, we believe that not only prospectively we believe this, but we've tested this in other jurisdictions that allow this right now in municipalities, and it is working. So when we talk about the accessory unit being truly accessory to the principal, it clearly is 2 single family units on the property, but one is truly accessory in size, scope, and operation to the principal building, the house. We believe that there will be more people living in the house than in the accessory dwelling unit in the house or in the accessory dwelling in the detached building. But even if there are more people living in the detached building, that means that the single family house is limited in terms of how many people can live in there. And so the total operations that are occurring on the property will not be dissimilar than what's currently happening on those single family residential properties with 1 house on it right now.
Just one follow-up question. Is the county going to evict people if there are more than 5 people living on the property?
No. What the county will do is if we determine that there's a violation, we'll issue a violation notice and we'll take it through our zoning violation process. And to be careful here, because there was some discussion about the notion that that is currently happening. I can tell you that where it is currently happening, I'm not gonna hone in on one particular property, but hopefully you can sort of read between the lines there, is that where we do have properties that are in violation of our codes, where someone is occupying a detached accessory building with a dwelling unit. We have issued violation notices. We have processed them through our adjudication process. And currently, right now, I am not aware of anybody who has received a violation notice where that detached accessory building is being occupied on many instances, not just the one that we may have been talking about. But we have gone through that process, we've adjudicated it, and that is not currently happening in any detached building in the county that we're aware of right now. And that's how we would go through that process if we found someone that was.
Okay, let's, can we go to this?
Quick question. Do you know what the county assessor is going to do when he looks at these units and says, you know, he had a garage, now it's an ADU? What's that gonna do to his tax?
And as I said before, where we have that issue, where we have that situation right now, the assessment has not changed because it's been treated as accessory to the principal. So we have situations right now where we have granted conditional uses for people to turn their internal, their house into an ADU. And we have at least 3 situations in the county where detached accessory buildings have been granted variations to have those detached buildings used as ADUs, and the assessments have not changed on those properties.
But the county doesn't control that, does it? The assessor.
Having said that, even in that situation, that has not changed the assessments.
So that money earning unit is not contributing anything to the taxpayers' base. The services that are needed by those people are not being paid for through the county's tax collection system.
And once
Yeah,
again.
well, let's not debate that, that's just the way it works.
We believe as accessory.
Do you have a follow-up question? Go right ahead. Let's go.
There's somebody behind you.
I have
a question.
I'm going down this road.
I'm.
Can you say your name again,
Oh,
please?
Heather Alchin, 1 South 710 Winfield Road,
Can you spell your last name?
ALLCHIN.
Thank you.
I'm extremely concerned about human trafficking and the care of children in families that are being moved from one family to another family. And this sounds like a disaster of having children in vulnerable places with people that might not be treating them well. Have you guys done a lot of research about what's going on in DuPage County and Cook County with human trafficking and children living in these dwellings aren't able to leave or get food or leave these situations? If there's a situation for help, we've got ER, police, you know, task force.
So I can tell you that none of those issues or concerns are going to be this is not an attempt to sidestep any of those issues or concerns. This is an attempt to scale more dwelling units in the county. Now, having said that, the county has in the past created an ad hoc task force on human trafficking. We had over 2 years of discussion on human trafficking, and we established some new regulations that we didn't have in place before relative to human trafficking. We have a human trafficking group dwelling quarters in just off of Winfield Road that the county has granted zoning relief for to deal exactly with that very issue in a residential home. When I talked about a daycare home earlier, and I take that back, a group home facility. The facility originally started as a group home facility and was allowed as of right, not more than 5 people unrelated by blood or marriage. From a practical standpoint, they took a dilapidated building, fixed it up. It was a building that was in our code enforcement clean and lean program, fixed it up and converted it into a dwelling group quarters that this county approved. And it was specifically for human trafficking, and it was relative to some of the task force work that the county had done. So we are acutely aware of that and acutely aware of the need, not only to deal with that issue, but also provide housing for those people as well. So the county, I think, has done a really good job in dealing with that issue relative to housing.
Thanks.
Can I follow up? Because that home is next to my home, and over the last 8 years that they've dwelled at that home, we've had several women leave that home voluntarily, which they're able to do. They're there to get help. However, they've ended up in my driveway, in my home, I've had people come to my door asking for things with my
I
children,
understand the magnitude.
which is
of the
why,
problem.
which is
Could
why.
I
we're-
ask you to take that up with him, by phone tomorrow or after the hearing so that I
For
can
sure.
catch this last gentleman?
Yeah, thank you for
Sir,
your.
you
advice.
wanted to ask a follow-up question? I don't want any, you've already stated your opinion. All I want is, do you have a question that was
Yeah.
prompted by his
Yeah,
remark?
my question is, this thing only applies to unincorporated areas? Why
Yes.
wouldn't a garage in Elmhurst qualify?
Our county has, our department only has jurisdiction for the unincorporated areas, so we can only, provide regulations for unincorporated.
We're like a model or?
Nope. No, this is just an initiative that the county board, has asked us to look into and research, and our jurisdiction is only
Excuse me.
unincorporated.
He needs to finish his answer before you say something.
Our jurisdiction is only in the unincorporated.
Yeah.
If municipalities wanna take us up on our model, they're entitled to that, but we're only dealing with the unincorporated.
No marketing. All right, I'm gonna close the hearing.
I just have two quick questions. One, he spent a lot of time.
I don't have a name again.
My name is Ralph Watt. I live at 0 South 550 Morningside. When he did his presentation,
Last person.
he made a number of comments about changing the lot size for flag lots. I don't even see that in the petition. Is it in here somewhere?
It is. It's in the definition section where the definition of, reserve, it's called reserve lots. They don't call them flag lots. Locally, we call them flag lots, but it's in the definition of reserve lots.
The next question, you keep saying that the ADUs can be up to 1,200 square feet. As I read this very clearly, it says the maximum size for an ADU is rate changed from 700 to 1,000.
It's 1,000.
Well, you kept saying
It's
1,200.
1,000.
Okay.
Apologize for the confusion. It's 1,000.
700, so that's such an increase.
It's 1,000.
Okay, folks, I'm gonna close the hearing. Thank you very much, to Mr. Haas for, your follow-up, responses. And, I think I wanna compliment the audience. We've taken public comment many, many times. Too often it's unruly. Very often it's incomprehensible, but all of your remarks were, well stated, and, I know this is great concern, and so I appreciate the orderly way in which you presented your comments. Thanks very much. We'll close.
Thank you for your time.